Hello, welcome to my weird review. I'm just gonna be talking about the T-34 models here. It is a Soviet tank in War Thunder under the Secretary of the USSR, and in my opinion, it's not very good. It, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's useless. I have footage of me actively using it well. It's just the fact that the T-34 isn't exactly the greatest thing on Earth, and we're going to be talking about that today. Alright, so let's start with my most played and the one I rather like. The T-34-85 models, the T-34-85 and the T-34-85D5T tanks, sitting at 5.3 and 5.7 respectively. They make decent tanks to play if you know what you're doing. However, most players don't actually know what they're doing. I've seen it personally. The T-34 is known to have decent armor, but the 85 variants don't exactly have the greatest of hull armor, considering it's still the exact same 45mm hull that was used and has been used consistently since 1940, and it hasn't changed at all. I've only really seen my T-34-85 survive shots to the hull unless it was from one of two things. Either it hit the driver hatch or it just hit at a really awkward angle, and this is pretty difficult to do. I can say that the T-34-85's armor is far from terrible if you look around where the turret is. The turret is pretty well armored and very durable if you know how to reliably use it. It's just the fact that the turret is not the greatest thing ever. In fact, I would like to argue the complete opposite. The T-34-85's turret is, well, it has these large ricochet angles on the sides of it, which if hit can ricochet rounds from even the Tiger II. It's just that it lacks the ability to really use these. You can see this even more in the T-44 tanks, which suffer the very similar issue, which is where they have these, they have basically the same turret. It has these large ricochet angles on the side, but then you look around to the front of it, and it has this just large, round, plate, which you can, it's easier to visualize if you look at the Tiger II-P, or because the Tiger II-P has the exact same turret design or similar concept design as the T-34-85's. The Tiger II also has the same thing where it puts the first stage ammo rack in the back of the turret, which is, in my opinion, not really a good thing. I don't think that the tanks should put their first stage ammo rack in the back of the turret, just because of the fact that putting it back there is, well, if it can get shot by pretty much anything. If it has any explosive filler at all, it's just gonna detonate and explode. Even APDS rounds can do it, and I've died to APCR into my first stage ammo rack at the back of my 85, so I can say without a doubt, yes, it can kill you regardless of where it comes from. Anyways, let's stop talking about this. Let's move on to some more of the capabilities. The T-34-85's turret design works best in a range of around 750 to further 750 meters away, and this is because the turret design is, the further away you get, the smaller the silhouette. So as long as you keep the tank hull down and at a distance of about here, of 750 to 1,000, you can still get a good amount of the penetration that your gun has without having to go into super close range where you would be easily killed or taken out, and it definitely helps in situations where you need it, such as if you end up in a situation where, you know, you're fighting panthers. However, the gun shares a pretty similar penetration value to that of the M4s with the 76mm, and this is pretty 148 millimeters of pen isn't bad, but it's also not amazing. The German tanks have a lot more penetration behind them and don't really need to aim as much. And plus the T-34-85 guns. The D5T uses the 85mm D5T cannon, which is decently reliable and can be used in a lot of altercations. It just struggles once you get into those long-range encounters. Same for the regular T-34-85, which uses the 85mm ZIS S-53 cannon, which both have the exact same penetration on their stock APHE round. However, the T-34-85 that uses the ZIS gun has APCR rounds, which can kind of help. I typically bring the APCR, but I don't recommend it unless you know how to aim for specific points. It's also not amazing in angled armor. The problem is that the T-34-85s fight Panthers a lot. Panthers are only pennable from the front through very small weak points on the turret. Or if you're really lucky, you can get the stupidest shot ever and ricochet a shell off of the ground into the turret. Not the turret, off the ground into the hull floor, which I've managed to do once, but not against a Panther. I wasn't even using a Russian tank. I was playing a Magak 2, and I ricocheted around off the ground into the hull floor of a T-95 and killed it. But that's beside the point. I'm getting off track. So let's get back to it. The mobility of the T-34. Let's just go straight to that. Generally, with all of the T-34 models, they have the exact same engine, which is a 500 horsepower engine. This engine is decently usable in any tank that needs it. It's decently mobile in a situation where it's going over large flat areas like Russia, where it doesn't need to be able to. Like in Russia, it's more effective because of all the large flat amounts of ground where the 500 horsepower engine can easily get it moving. And before anyone says anything, yes, T-34s do have a 500 horsepower engine. Sure, when you use the X-ray or you check the engine of tanks in game, it says a different engine value, but this is because that is the engine's horsepower at the specific RPM. So I'm saying the actual engine's horsepower from just a straight start, which is standing still to go forward. Horsepower doesn't increase as you increase the RPM because the engine's moving now. But I'm just saying all T-34s have a standard 500 horsepower engine, which is decent, but it's not perfect. The T-34-85 is a forward gear of around 55 kilometers an hour and a reverse gear of 9 kilometers an hour. You can generally see these similar transmission setups and these forward and reverse gears within all T-34 models, where most of them don't have most of them don't really have much of a reverse gear, but they are pretty decently fast if you can get moving. Another issue you can see, especially in the T-34-85s, is they struggle a lot to get up hills. They are not good at hill climbing, and it's not exactly recommended that you go on hills, especially considering that you have very little gun depression, around -5, and it means that going up hills is basically out of the question. And if you go up a hill, you're going to end up on the top of it, and some Sherman or something else is going to shove it round into the lower side of your hull and just one-shot you. So that's a bit of an issue. In summary, the T-34-85 is alright if you can play it correctly, but it does require map knowledge, and it requires knowledge of how to hold down C and move your mouse around, which a lot of players don't seem to understand. I don't think that it really needs to be considered bad, but I'm going to consider it a bad tank just because of the fact that it's not super effective unless you know how to use it correctly. This is a staple for a lot of nation tanks, uh, even for Panzer IVs, which I'll get to in a later video, and they are very situational, well, not situational, but more of the fact that they require a lot more knowledge of the game in order to be used effectively. T-34s are about as mobile as an M24, and that's just a bit of an issue. Anyways, next up, we have the T-34 1942 and the T-34E STZ models. Let's start with our T-34 1942, shall we? This tank was, well, obviously it was made in 1942 and has a couple upgrades over its older counterpart being the 1941 model. It has an increase to armor from 45mm of turret armor all around to 53mm all around, and something I see as an improvement is a decrease in ammo capacity. I mean, having less ammo is definitely better because it decreases your chances of getting ammo racked, and getting ammo racked means death, which is bad. I'm gonna be making it so that these are basically the same tank, but I'm gonna cover them separately. Anyways, the gun, which all T-30, so there's 3 T-34 models that, well, actually there's 5 if we count the exports, because we have the 1941, the 1942, the 1943, and the Chinese tech tree, the Finnish 1941, which is just the Finnish T-34, and then we have the STZ, which all use the exact same gun with the exact same pen of 96 with its best APHE. At a battle rating of 4.0, 96mm sounds pretty bad, which I can say is, unless you know weak points, and I know weak points pretty decently, and plus, if you're lucky enough, you can just lol pen like a good chunk of tanks in the game, and it works really well. These T-34s actually suffer some a pretty big issue. There's actually a super rare chance where you can run into a VK3002, also known as the Proto Panther. The Proto Panther does sit at 5.0, but it could get it down tier to 4.7. If that happens, and then you happen to be up tier to 4.7 from 4.0, you could hypothetically run into a VK3002, which isn't good, because those things are scary if you're at a BR where you can't easily pen it. The T-34 also, again, suffers another issue, being its mobility, considering they all have the exact same engine. And it's also at a BR where it is guaranteed to always be fighting at least something that carries the Panzer IV gun, which is just a nightmare, because the Panzer IV gun pens everything at its BR with next to no issue, and that is a problem, because what are you supposed to do against it? Well, I'll tell you. What you can do about it is use one of the best T-34s in the game, the T-34E STZ. This is by far one of my favorite T-34 models because, well, you see, it did the same thing that the M4A3E2 Jumbo did. Just shove another plate onto it. And being that the T-34 already has a heavily angled upper front plate, adding this second plate on top of it means that it's actually immune to the Panzer IV gun, even at close range. Meaning that, I keep saying meaning that, but anyways, it can actually survive a Panzer IV-H, a Panzer IV-H shot at close range into its hull, which is just, yeah, you can take that, you lol-penning idiot. Anyways, the T-34E STZ still has an issue. What is it? Well, I'm sure it's obvious. No? You don't know what it is? Alright, well, I'll tell you anyways. It's the turret, because of course it is. The T-34 models all suffer the issue of their turret having some pretty dumb weak spots. I mean, the 1942 and the 85 models have this turret neck, which can just be penned by everything without much issue, and it instantly kills your entire crew if they have APHE. The STZ doesn't have this turret neck, nor does the 40 or 41 models. However, it has another issue, being that it has these flat plates, and these flat plates are pretty easy to pen. You can die to Shermans from the front if they know how to shoot there, which most do. Mobility is still pretty much non-existent because they have that staple 500 horsepower engine. But at the very least, you don't have too much of a problem anymore because you trade your mobility for your armor, and I think that is a fair trade to make. I would like to note as a final thing for these tanks, they would be the T-34 1942 and STZ make a very good lineup together, being both at 4.0, and you can bring them both together. They are both objectively pretty good tanks, and I would generally recommend using them if you are someone who likes T-34s, because they can reliably do stuff. To be, Russian bias machines in terms of the STZ, or if you just want to play something like a T-34, the 1942 could be your thing. Anyways, now for the last models that I actually played and recorded for this video, the 1940 and 1941 models of the T-34s. These two are pretty similar, so I'll just cover them generally, considering they have the exact same armor values, engine values, and but the thing that makes them different is the guns. The 1940 has a decent gun, but it absolutely sucks at long range due to it being short-barreled. It suffers the same issue as the Panzer IV F1 or the Panzer III J, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I mean, at these BRs, these tanks have actual armor. Wow! What an amazing thing! Having armor is incredible, because these are tanks that, at their BR, are actually top of the mobility gang for most medium tanks. I mean, these are literally the fastest medium tanks of the BR, well, most mobile at least. I mean, the Cromwell does exist, but how often do you run into those? If you're fighting Britain, that's mostly going to be Churchills, or Matildas, or Idiots and Crusaders, but that's beside the point. The 1940 actually has decent pen if you know how to use it right, and if you know weak spots of tanks, you can basically just go through everything without issue. And the 1941 just is the exact same as the 1940, it just has the 96 millimeters of pen that all other T-34 models have until the 85, well, until, oh god, the 57. Now for my least favorite of the models, the T-34-57. Oh my god, I hate this thing so much. I don't care what you say, it's practically useless in combat. It's literally useless. What are you supposed to do with it? The armor can't resist anything unless you're like 2,000 meters away and it's a Panzer IV F1 firing APHE at you. The gun has alright pen, I guess, but only 14 grams of HE filler, or high explosive filler, which, it sounds good for 57mm unless you compare it to other things of different calibers. I mean, yeah, the stock round has 14 grams, and there's an upgraded round with 18 grams. Wow, what a difference. The Swedish PVK-V4 with the exact same caliber of 57mm has 60 grams of explosive filler in its APHE round, which makes it just all the more better. Why would you not use that? Because it's so much more effective in actually killing things. And then again, the Panzer III has 17 grams of explosive filler, which is more than the T-34-57 stock round, well, that's 3.3 instead of 4.7. Hell, the L-62 Anti-2 has an SPAA tank at 2.3 with a 40mm Bofor gun, has 38 grams of explosive filler in its SAP HEI round. Like, are you joking? The T-34-57 is practically just firing solid shot rounds at that point. You have to perfectly aim at ammo racks, or stupidly difficult spots that can easily kill the crew, but it's almost impossible to realistically pen them in a combat scenario. I mean, the ASU-57 has less HE filler than the T-34-57, But at least the ASU-57 is a small, hard-to-find target. It's even hard to hit if it's on the move in some situations, and is decently fast. Plus, it can at least scout targets, meaning it has a bit more of a use. In fact, an ASU-57 can actually tackle and take out a good chunk of vehicles up to 6'7". 6'7". There's Tiger 2 area. That is dumb. The T-3457 does not have this ability. It struggles with turning, it can't hill climb, and it is generally just an awful vehicle that I would recommend just avoiding flat out. Do not play it unless you don't value your existence. I personally would recommend a better thing of the KV-1 Zis 5. It's the exact same BR, yes, but it actually has stupidly thick armor and can be used in a lot more situations. Anyways, back on our topic here. The T-34 tanks are decent. They're alright. I would say they suffer a large sum of issues, yes, regarding those issues regard their mobility, their weapons, and their armor, making them a lot less viable than other things at the same battle rating. However, I would like to note that I love the T-34s except for the 57. I hate the 57. I love all T-34 models regardless of where they come from or what they are, because they just simply have enough armor to be able to tackle most threats without too much of an issue if you know how to play your cards right, and the guns are decently reliable enough to where you can take out most targets in the game. Anyways, this is the end of my video. Have a nice day to all who watched it all the way through. Goodbye.